Hello, America. There is a need to be able to speak for the blind sacrifices of Russians, as Americans, Russians, and Ukraine simultaneously. How could they now do that? Worse and worse. Before wars, there is a way to do it. In other words, give them the syntax that doesn't leave out what they're forced to leave out. Here and there, they share. Hundreds of nations, individually grouped and together, entertained pseudosciences. In other words, sophistication slash non-sophistication, collusion, criminally foreign influence at all locations, areas, and states. For example, with regards to there are formal tellings and preservation of American history in our faces, overtly slash simultaneously. It is the same thing with the reception of Ukrainian history and of Russian history. Whole bunch of ways this is actually recorded. We have to use what's hyper evidential. See, leaders, no matter how powerful they get, they can become. They could only be over locations, areas, and states in semi-ancient times, entertaining and so increasingly self-valuing. Having been entertained, science is abridged since semi-ancient times. Control your minds. Vaccines. Real evolution science should only feel like games, and we should sense it way before bombs should become power. Even guns. Long. And so, for example, they have agreements where and how they have mental health involved with hospitals and with lawyers. Originally, I'm not a lawyer. The lawyers originally instilled were roles with the predicate acts delivery system method, the criminal insidiousness delivery system method that was entrenched north and south in America before America was America, before the founders of America were even born. Before the founders of Ukraine were even born. Before the founders of Russia were even born. Look at how in Russia and in America the houses are designed by that method that was entrenched north and south with slavery before our founders were even born. No one had free speech. And they had to pretend others simultaneously. So, and it was illegal to speak about what's simultaneous. And they knew that we would have to do that, so they made the breaching method knew that. No one fathomed that as sophistication slash non-sophistication. So knew that they would have to blame on other things, others, ourselves. More and more, the real causes of negative value, nature, progression, accident, because nature would be demonstrated. Nature demonstrates the breaching method, a predicate acts delivery system method, a criminal insidiousness, nature's delivery system method is the cause of wars and self-value uses of them, because that's used remotely too. This is where and how we are hyper-identity, which is discern how we are identity as an identity of simultaneous, as we know is actually true always. We are a species identity of volume, species body, invisible but still discernible. We are grouped body and individuals. The species body in singular is made up all singular individuals. We are finite, grouped, and all together. One value slash value progression. Value and identity also simultaneously have relationships to what is positive and negative simultaneously. Negative because identity's hyper identity is constantly being demonstrated to us, but now through systems tactical ulterior from that which is hyper native pure. So of course, Native American rights are bridged. They are not allowed to be hyper Native American. They, no matter how powerful a leader can become, they're not capable of affording. And the identity of the grounds, identity of relationship to itself, actually capable of being. And actually wanted, needed by each person. It only feels like games, evolution, science, or we sense it. See, this criminally re-engineered the sciences and its reception of and its roles with our reception of ourselves. Because all that and everyone was already at all locations, areas, and states. These were database relationships before our founding parents were even born, before computers. We were instances. We were as values / identities of value progression to all locations. They're making positive and negative treatments. How come they leave out? I'll show you how. I'm not asking you. I'm think about it. The breaching method made them leave out, and still makes everyone self-value, having been left out and leaving out why and how, which trials, what they were, even if they were made up, and what they were simultaneously roles with what was North and South America involved with slavery with black as a color. No. Now that's a physical identity of relationship to metaphysics that are discernibly, overtly / insidiously, criminally foreign influenced, overtly / insidiously simultaneously, and hyper simultaneously, to that extent we can discern, which is positive or negative. Two, it takes a little bit more contemplation because, for example, before the order of the finite, the smallest detail of physics now, is the value of sequence true that came before this. See, we have this offensively denied by the logic and the defenses of integrity at the other side of the blind sacrifices of the military and of every individual at all locations, areas, and states, everywhere the species identity of volume is. Not one spoke for black nor white. See pupils. Not one person's skin has black across the globe. Now, where, and how? There means needs. Oh, this person's black or that person's white. If you're describing them or something like that, and you had to. In other words, this is where the nature of the law and the nature of criminal insidiousness have to be understood simultaneously. It has to be understood as an identity, the ground's identity of relationship to itself, and the value of it, where and how criminal insidiousness is one identity of, is helping us discern the value of it, where and how that's relevant to the science of hyperpantheism, which only communicates through individuals. And it's a hyper contemplation. Prayer was a word that was revealed where it had conjunction to sciences before they became criminally foreign influence. And that was multi-front with where and how that was multi-front with and as in collusion with criminally foreign influence, identity, the ground, locations, uses, off campuses, where everyone was. That breaching method, in other words, it's overtly / insidiously discernible, invisible but discernible. The predicate acts delivery system method, the criminal insidiousness delivery system method. When people deny the significance of the value of this too. And its relativity to all subjects' treatments. And all subjects' treatments themselves, because the volume science / hyperscience, that language /S languages, that they really are. That each individually grouped it together with a better than living identity of relationship to themselves, where and how the species identity of volume does. All the parts of our body have a semi-nature relationship to our complete identity. So there are proofs that this is how they would speak and teach this as the ancients that used English, had revealed English in other languages, because the hyper invisible, there's only one way to discern it, and it's through you contemplating what is actually, the value of the simultaneous. It has an identity of relationship to itself, that which is really why and how we are individual, grouped, and species, which is really why we have to discern the identity of relationship to itself. The identity of a cell has simultaneously as a cell a nucleus, a cell body, and a cell wall /S. I tell best vaccines. So all the plants, the cell, they share this trinity, and the cell walls touching each other, so it got even thicker. And the gases and as one come through, and the water come through with the elements of it, as in demonstration of 1/3/5 identities of sequence nature / simultaneous nature. And again, they are bound as an identity of relationship to itself, even the smallest finite detail and difference has. Vaccines. I teach you things, but go on. Until, in other words, so they have the campuses of each age in nature as victim reactions to a child abuse, that has each identity of sophistication / non-sophistication. That now this includes where and how we need to use the words like sophistication and criminal insidiousness, and positive and negative identity, and speaking it positive / identity / negative, and simultaneously negative / positive negative / identity / positive. For example, relevant to where and how the identity of right to left is distinct from the identity of left to right, because the identity of hypersimultaneous that wasn't invented, that which is the increasing value of actually what will and does make things work or not, and showing us too that positive can be further positive or negative simultaneously. A criminal insidiousness nature, like a wrongdoer, relevant to a predicate acts delivery system, actor, and role, which note when they had things like slavery, uses of their ground, overt and really against everyone, witch trial, slavery, all kinds of crazy laws, rather than having us organized on that. They have each identity of science with research and takes on it made to exhaust them, tire them out. Like, for example, and then they start tiring themselves out as the identity of relationship to where and how the breaching method would measure and maintain everyone. All identities of sophistication, all / non-sophistication, all ground locations, either blaming other things, others, or selves for the real cause of negative value nature, progressions, acts, and natures, where and how the only formal fact sheet nature. In other words, otherwise it would be sensed. And this is that was when it was being sustained. No one fathomed, because no one discerned that where and how it made that self-valued. because it made the identity of the grounds, scientific fact treatment, value treatments, you know, they couldn't defend themselves and afford short words in the revelations because to protract. So they forced people to entertain at 1/3/5 identity of the ground locations. And through the phenomena related through phenomena, through a phenomenon / phenomena relevant to the hyper simultaneous. It's also at 1/5/10/15. In other words, the same or separately. 3/5. 5/. In other words, we could see that we'll observe when we map this out, which I should have. I'm sacrificing what I'm being worse than extorted, for example, but everyone is. So everyone spoke and speaks through value, through sciences abridged, or through services that are in conjunction with the branches individually grouped and together still slavery rules left by our founders who went like this to us with what is actually recorded. They want us to explain how the sciences were individually grouped and together, criminally foreign influenced by a method that knew we would have to blame other things, others, or ourselves wrongly, even when correctly. The exact way the breaching method wanted, needs, and maintains to keep it, in other words, uses of all identity ground locations. Increasingly with other motivations and interests apparent. And even where that is real and apparent, they are juxtaposed with other motivations, natures, needs, roles, where acting is at all locations, where offensive evidence reception, data reception, identity reception, the value of sequence reception, the value of simultaneous reception is offensively prevented by a breaching method, a hyper predicate acts delivery system method that maintains roles with, for example, where and how roles with slavery, entertain that as a wrongdoer. Time goes on, that your self-valuing roles as predicate acts roles, as predicate acts delivery system singular method roles, all locations, areas, and states. It is what is actually recorded, how they have self-value, how the sciences are being and having been abridged, and how what is hyper evidential is prevented free speech and voice. So we have this obfuscated from and as what is increasingly actually manifest within as the reception of modern languages and of English. For example, so there is the correlate. There is what if correlative. There is what is a correlative conjunction. There is a coordinating conjunction, and there is what is hyperconjunctive. What is hyperconjunctive is the only identity of volume as the hypersimultaneous. That is all identities at the same time. So its identity of relationship to itself, and it shows the extent of its volume that we could discern, and the value of that, for example, is one of the ways one part of itself is invisible but still discernible and describable, because it is in demonstration of where and how to use our words, where and how to set it up. The hyperpantheism, means out of nowhere, where and how to use, the phenomena of how countries individually grouped and together are locked to identity ground locations. See, these are they're just like the physical identity ground locations are distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously the volume science the way humanity's volume is. And see, when we're other by then the individual volume science that uses the value of finite details, the value active and progressive simultaneously, with the value of sequence true before that too, and to come, because sequence / simultaneous nature. What was to understand how people who are trying to do their best to be Americans would or could entertain what New York City was built as, with all that is simultaneous, that we know is simultaneous. Now, here, for example, is where and how people's emotions, if someone was in the room, people were in the room, they would react. And the same quality of fact-tripping nature, originally still that couldn't defend logic and the justification of an individual group together. In other words, and B, to counter quality of fact-tripping nature that forces use of names treatments, for example, in place of actual metaphysics. In other words, one of the most overt examples is how they used for the breaching method used black with the law. And we know there was a whole bunch of uses of it, including people A through Z, no matter what color, because everyone see the science of black and white, see black pupils, see the whites of eyes. There's a famous phrase with American history repeated to us. Don't shoot until you see the whites of eyes. See, the ancient gaming system, where we fight in metaphysics, because of finite values being ignored, grouped, until everyone's blaming the real cause of these problems and things, other things, others, or themselves, exactly what the breaching method wanted and need. That's exactly why it's either black or white. And no one realizes, and they'll fight with you if you say, oh, well, the breaching method put the black there. Everyone should know what we're talking about. No, because offensively, and see, the breaching method knew that rolls with this. We're going to have to blame other things, others, ourselves. They would have to be. See, they're already through value nature systems, uses of identity. These are child abuse methods and identity theft / fraud / slander method, where and how this trinity is manifest. To best boxing, again, there are two other identities of sequence / simultaneous nature, semi / completely discernible with this as the value of sequence that came before anything that is generated now, for example. To the extent of this, we know this is true. Only the extent of it is debatable. So, but where and how they would debate things that are not debatable, and or just put people to fake words, individually grouped in together, and simultaneously how they got away with that, and still are getting away with it. So still increasingly self-valuing that having been. So, for example, it was because the methods of criminally foreign influence readings of statutes. So like gangs and things like that do bad things with little kids. Other people use weapons of roles with fact-tripping nature data evidence, the value of sequence truth for evidence. Like, what is really? So when they have readings of statutes, they give precedence of value to this person's job is this, so we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt. This person, they do that criminally though, because they've been planting evidences at each location. So originally, still, the breaching method knew all identities of sophistication / non-sophistication. Non-sophistication because of all those different reasons that we know. Tactically, differentially, sickly, criminally foreign influence, education and or not education. And simultaneously, like, for example, they didn't even let people read if they're black. The breaching method didn't. Who's they? Rolls with the singular breaching method. Now, this stole the identity of English history from themselves too. And they have that self-value. Where and how? Non-integrity as the only integrity because of the method that was sophistication uses of those 5 points. All locations of homes, all campuses, science locations. In other words, first, all database relationships. All locations, all database relationships. Further, inter-sciences individually grouped together. And further, interbranch all exceptions, the exception nature tied to them, the overt criminal enterprises, private everyone, A through Z, their opinions / convictions, self-defended simultaneously, criminally foreign influence uses of qualities of fact treatment nature, like premises treatments, the value of sequence treatments, true. The value of simultaneous, true. So the military has roles with the countries involved. Leading up to the World Trade Center attack and since, for example, what is it? Hyper evidentially recorded. And with the Connecticut news media lying to, no, in other words, the CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News, but also their interbranch sources did this and do this with them. And so so they pretend people, they initiate communications between people so they can put fake communications. And they increasingly have to put people to fake communications with themselves that weren't at all. They have to put fake emails, replace what is actually recorded, even replacing what is actually recorded and the actual value of it. They're actually aware of. Where and how, in other words, the Wethersfield police are involved with wire crime methods and acts and identity thefts and frauds since I was a kid. And I caught them doing this against everyone, roles intercities, on and off the campuses, on and off private database relationships, their family members, where they work, where they live, uses of the kids of principals, of deans, uses of the kids of teachers, of people with the military, of people with business offices, uses of sense and sensibility treatments to measure and maintain for their own needs to hide life progression, their actually recorded nature, the actual value of it, distinctly from the breaching method that measures and maintains that the outcome /S. Measures and maintain them. Self-value roles with and as the only identities of wealth, self-value being and having been criminally foreign influenced, forced by the breaching method, but forced also by nature and demonstration of it. And they blamed what nature demonstrates on other things, others ourselves, self-valuing that which they won't let and didn't let told on, like what I caught them doing with Connecticut schools and New York schools leading up to the World Trade Center attack and since, and interbranch locations. So that they were supposed to give people the right to remain innocent innocent until proven guilty. For example, they were involved with torture before the World Trade Center attack, and then they used the Patriot Act. So they keep locking down the only sophistication and to roll self-value criminally foreign. This is part of the reason why we go to space and everyone has self-value rules was going to space beyond the known motivations is because all identities of sophistication are being having been used remotely through other motivations, nature, needs, and interests of corruption, and or as tied to uses of identity ground, reception and perception, and fact-keeping nature, uses of that. For example, the Bravo Network to Mr. Cohen, please respond for a police chief Cintron and people involved with ad placements in the news media, where and how the news media that has roles fabricating emails with FBI and with Wethersfield Police and with other agencies and their family members through time, retired and standing, and on and off all the campuses I went to. They have roles with federal criminals, overt criminal enterprises, even if they're legitimately with them undercover. Simultaneously, they have roles with that predicate acts delivery system method, that criminal insidiousness nature delivery system method that is relevant to where and how such sloppy, sick uses of black and metaphysics simultaneously are only allowed heard. Yeah. So how we end war is by staying on metaphysics, staying on how, where, and how. So these are uses of names to force time use all simultaneously, too fast, too slow, to prevent at all locations anyone from countering too simultaneously. All defenses of what they say is the value of emotions, good or bad. That is also being then defenses of, but that's just, we're this is this. All that is recorded. They're offensively. Our police departments, each age of, the identity, the ground identity of expert titles of jobs having been used remotely, having been blaming other things, others themselves. There are manifest things in demonstration of this, like where and how they pretend to believe on a mass scale because they're Republicans or Democrats, or how what they could judge about other people by what they say about politics, or what it means if we lie about who. What if I said I'm for candidate X, but I'm really for candidate Y? Doesn't, in other words, they're the ones responding. That's part of what's actually recorded and communicated. They want me to lie, then they pretend their emotions, or they pretend their motivations are value where they are. Where the overt criminal enterprises, the private ones, the exceptions in an exception nature, like the military, like the service people, like the prison, tied to the interbranch, and themselves individually grouped in together. It's not complicated at all. It's just extensive. From here, countries A through Z, they're used remotely. No sophistication spoke. And they won't allow it on time. And then they have to pretend passions and emotions. And they say, sue me. That's why we have to counter them forging and switching names. They do that because that's a method they do where they stack more roles with more wrongdoing. They did it so long, their more roles with predicate acts. Predicate acts delivery system method / methods. All the methods are maintained. By nature, multi-front. The simple method showed that tall identity, ground identities of sophistication / non-sophistication. slash pseudo-sophistication. Overtly, like overt criminal enterprises, the private ones originally still self-valued. If you self-value roles with a system that is other than hyper-native pure, nature is going to demonstrate negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. So you have people that bring subjects like marijuana, and then they group things as medicine or medical, you know what I mean? Or drugs. No, it's a plant. And no, I'm not speaking about the selling of it. I am speaking about the restriction of it, though. In other words, they have that rat trap simultaneously on New York City. This is countries A through Z. Self-valued roles with it. Otherwise, they hurt, trick, persuaded people through our own law. So they are recorded consciously, knowing they affected us needing to use other people's names. And they use that method of simultaneously pretending not to realize. Everyone's forced to speak through others. See, the hierarchy of Connecticut interbranch through administrations, through political parties. For them simultaneously pretending not to realize. They've been using the town offices. They've been using worse than just election crimes simultaneously. The breaching method has been using where they put election crimes as a subject treatment. That leaves out what is hyper simultaneously actually recorded. There's that slavery method against people, colonists A through Z. That was already perfected and additional to what is already sickly distinctly before that, already against the Native Americans A through Z. And so now additionally as colonists. And that's relevant to where and how the indivisible but still discernible can be discerned. Because there was things it was constantly, sickly non-distinctly against Native Americans and against colonists. Sickly non-distinctly, but they self-value roles. Because everyone was born, the sciences, already inclusion with all locations. In other words, knowing that you have roles with those crazy forms of slavery, you have roles with those crazy sciences abridged, positive and negative treatments that are in collusion against all identities, per identity's volume, individual, grouped, species, singular body. So we could sense this about the group. Does it defend individuals and seek the value of sequence truth, the value of integrity of facts, evidence, perception? No. So we have to deal with where and how they have the training of police forms and where they have inclusion narratives that are offensively affront where and how the nature demonstrates us really what prevents inclusion and needs to pretend so others simultaneously. And or needs to have two simultaneously. Criminally foreign influence needs to pretend to be to collude with that, and or self-value delusions. They're also relevant to where and how offensive data, evidence, and identity perception, value of sequence perception, and a value of simultaneous perception is relevant here. So New York City, this is also hyper journalism. I am also not a journalist. So they also recorded victims that only keep capable of being victim predators because of where and how they force everyone to speak through others and or they attach us to fake words. And they attach everyone around us to fake words. It's part of where and how really the quality of subjects treatments and how they leave out the value of the simultaneous, the value of sequence truth. So sequence shifts roles were coordinated leading up to the World Trade Center attack locations in Manhattan. And and with the same people that are involved in Connecticut interbranch, all exceptions, the exception nature tied to them, and even on and off the state judicial branch offices, on and off the state prison offices, collusion with predicate acts and wrongdoing at child campuses through time, per an identity theft slash fraud slash slander method that is increasingly needed to be referred to. I mean, to be observed that way because of where and how it's increasingly valuable, how non-distinctly the people of New York City and of the suburbs from here to Russia to Ukraine have recorded self-valued apparent motivations juxtaposed with other ones, with where and how they pretend not to realize and really don't realize regarding how the slavery was involved with this. But since before cars, with the scale and means to infrastructure and means to the upkeep of it, and with value systems, New York City is overtly foreign influence people stacking on an overtly tactically denatured base that is incapable of growing food outside their houses. Additionally, where and how each of the people were taken to individually grouped and together to identities of jobs and of titles, while simultaneously being offensively measured, maintained, or hurt, blaming other things, others, ourselves, where and how white and black are only allowed to be used with physical delusions formally, and where that has hyperconjunctive, correlative, and coordinating roles with the relevance we hear. Must fourth attend the timeless method, surging through all things, right there and then. So, in other words, yin yang is a picture of this. But there are proofs that the ancients would say, and or they say now, because I'm not an expert on yin yang. There are proofs that it went with, before the sciences became criminally foreign influence, it went with Alpha and Omega simultaneously to teach about exceptions and exception nature. We are all its identity of volume, except where and how we are not. To an extent, we are. We are the same identity of volume, except for the extent we are not. We are individuals, and we're the species' individual body of volume, and we are positive to its increasing volume everywhere it is, or not per its system law. These are all tactile from since ancient times, all locations, areas, and states, identities of names, titles. Sciences, same thing. Locations, homes, people, brothers or sisters. This just lies about our communications with each other. This has people, that's why people are so scared about the impression of others. Oh, this person has this person does say, oh, I don't care. You know, it's either A or B. Or indifference employed fake exceptions in exception nature. There's a method. Someone lies about a mathematical value. You know, we just like we could discern that with a calculator. If it's like a, you know, we could do that with how it is functional and how there are multiple increasing functionalities that can be gained through understanding how it is functional, where and how the 5 identities of sequence / simultaneous nature are distinct identities of volume that are only increasing because they are the same one, too. Again, cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall, and the 2 identities of sequence / simultaneous nature, demonstrated by the whole thing, when it's actually properly conceived, and the value differentially, especially critical of the sciences, how they share an identity. So when they bring up the subject, especially when they bring them up parted from what is actually recorded simultaneous. And so too, we have to address how hypercollusion, overtly / insidiously prevented, has gotten away with itself by pretending to be for inclusion, by keeping roles with all identity ground locations, no database relationships, instances, narratives, uses of names, other people's names, perception, and where and how. Originally, still they use time simultaneously, too fast, too slow, to keep the wrong outcome /s, and or the right outcomes too. Self-value being and having been used to collusion /s with that method /s. All these motivation nature needs roles. To all locate kept needing to hide the same line progression, kept needing to use. The schools, that pseudo sophistication, narratives by theater, positive and negative treatments. It's this or that. Look, that's why things were so bad. So they increasingly self-value that negative haven't been. No. They cannot afford a teacher telling truth. Make sure they get response for Trinity, for Central Connecticut State University, involved with predicate acts with the FBI and CIA. Don't tell me I made a theory. I'm talking about sequence shifts leading up to and name switching and forging predicate acts in cases. The switching names is how they get away with it. They hid this from Judge Napolitano, from the other judges, and or with some too. So make sure they get on paper too. New Britain Superior Court and Hartford courts leading up to the world, and Hartford, Connecticut, New Britain, Connecticut, with on off the state of Connecticut judicial branch offices all along that route through time. That intercity, is originally and still since founding. This is where George Washington, as they call him, Old Wethersfield, and counter-extort that which he had to leave entrenched with slavery north and south, blaming other things, others, ourselves, for the real cause of it still, but forced to roles with what was totally forbidden by the law, which was anyone to even fathom saying or getting forced or to be told that the Constitution should be unabridged and that it should defend people allowed to speak freely. So the breaching method forced them to pretend other. It forces it now and still. Religion here. Before the messengers of modern religions, countries individually grouped and together had been forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded to entertain the sciences criminally foreign influenced, and while pretending other, and not for the motivations they wanted and needed, and increasingly want and need because of how they get away with hiding this. So please respond for the branches of government and for the overt criminal enterprises that brought themselves into this with the branches of government Two, kept, in other words, they have body dumping spots and uses of juxtaposed distinct natures of organized crime and of worse than war crimes. Like, for example, where and how countries individually grouped and together were recorded originally and still blaming other for what the breaching method what was actually recorded. Something. I'm about to lose my internet connection because my battery's going to go out. Thank you, people. Vaccines. Now hear your soul. Please respond. I'll show you how to fix wars. Because this is military too, you guys know. And see, everyone speaks through others. Then they pretend emotions and passions why they hate people. In other words, this is a game with the started by the O'Brien family with the executive police forms. I don't know them. I have people from other classrooms. It's a game where each age of campus I went to has people involved with private schools that planted evidences at locations, identity thefts and frauds. Then you pretend the courts pretend they don't, wherever you with them then. In other words, they recorded themselves with tricks like that. They're leaving out, they can't afford exception nature demonstrated because they already have their all kinds of rules with all kinds of offensive data reception, evidence reception, value sequence, value simultaneous reception, criminally foreign influence, and delusions wrought. The roles and uses with that, and remote uses of them self-evaluate for other causes and with delusions. The only reason we haven't gotten through the delusions because everyone's fake and no one's following the law and putting things on writing. They're making fake exceptions to pretend other. Increasingly, they can't afford how nature wants and needs us to speak and teach and use about the exceptions of how one identity of cell as an increasing identity of volume is an exception as distinct identities, plural, of volume as its own identity. It's how it is self-generating. One identity of hyper-simultaneous, which is simultaneously a forever nature, constantly, increasingly, and it is variably things too, vaccines, to me, as you, and to you as me. The identity that is right to left and that is left to right, distinctly, non-distinctly, and hyper-simultaneously, and simultaneously is bound. So they're hyper-invisible but still discernible. With the languages were revealed to be teaching about the invisible but still discernible and how it is saw and why it is saw, distinctly and non-distinctly and hyper-simultaneously, why and how it is the same way, distinctly, non-distinctly, and hyper-simultaneously, hyper-invisible but still discernible. Here. The means appear. Evolution's fruits and gifts means from nowhere. YouTuber Anthony Wall. Boxing. I have to get my boxing license. I don't know what I'm going to do with the pandemic still. And these other things, because I told you guys, Interbranch, before the World Trade Center attack, I was trying to report where people asked me to report. And I knew about things about it I didn't tell them about. Because people enter cities from years ago made confessions about the same locations, uses. Turns out the whole bunch of foreign and domestic have been uses of locations tied to where they how they have a lot more phenomena tied to where people go to the jail all the time, etc. Even little things, etc. Yeah. Even instances that are not even reported, no one even realized they're recording fake things to keep remote uses of everyone.